is Dr.
Hello.
Bach, and today I wanted to present to you the Boatman family. We have Scott and Ashley here, and we wanted to discuss their journey in a little bit more detail. I think so far it's been fascinating to have met your family, to be involved in your journey, and I think the story needs to be told. So just a little background. In March, I was contacted. In March, I was contacted by a good friend of mine. Hey, Jake.
He's too
By
excited.
a good friend of mine, Jenna Champagne. She's a registered nurse. She's in the cannabis industry, and she said, "Hey, you gotta look at this." You know, this family contacted me, and she said, "Look at this. There's a communication of their child with the family." You know, Jake. You know, I didn't know his name at that time, but Jake apparently communicated by typing on a computer with his parents, and it was a fairly interesting message. So I told her, "Hey, you got to get me in touch with the Boatmans and see what's going on here." So maybe, you know, before I start talking too much, maybe tell us the story from your perspective. How, you know, where you're coming from. You know, tell us about your family and why you reached out to Jenna, and then how we met, what has transpired, and we go from there.
Okay. Ashley, do you want to tell them the story, and then I'll pick up where Jenna starts?
Sure. Yeah. So, like you said, we're Ashley and Scott, and this is Jacob. We live just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Both Scott and I are from here. So we have known each other for a really long time, and Jacob is our middle child. We have an older daughter and a younger daughter as well. He has always been full of energy and very excited, but our journey kind of started with therapies and all that kind of stuff, because when he was around 18 months old, the pediatrician thought that he wasn't really meeting all the necessary milestones in terms of gross and fine motor skills, but especially speech. So we started down the path of speech therapies with Babies Can't Wait here in Georgia. They worked with him from 18 months to 3 years. We didn't see a lot of progress, but during that time, from when he was first learning to walk, when he was around 1, all the way up until about between 2 and 3 years old, he was really lively, lots of, interaction with us, interaction with his older sister. We have lots of little cousins for him to play with, and lots of friends with kids, and very interactive, lots of singing and babbling and pretend playing with toys and things like that. And right around 3, he wasn't making any more progress with adding any additional words. And some of the words that he did have seemed to start disappearing. And we could get them out sometimes if we really, really pushed him, but he was very resistant to talking on his own. So we did what we could. We put in a lot of applications and tried to get into local therapy centers, and just couldn't ever quite make a connection here with people to get him in somewhere that we felt like could help him. So he started a pre-K program that sort of was a special needs pre-K program where they focused more on those gross and fine motor skills, speech, functional graphs, things like that. And in the 2 years he was there, he didn't make hardly any progress at all. And in fact, in those 2 years, really, really ramped up his anxiety. Because he didn't have any speech, every time he was away from us, he would get very anxious about teachers and things not being able to meet his needs. He couldn't communicate even the simplest thing of wanting or desiring a snack or something to drink. And you could just tell on the days that he was at school, it was exhausting and very frustrating. And honestly, he seemed very scared all the time. If he wasn't with us, he was terrified that if he needed anything, he wasn't going to be able to communicate with anyone. So because I spent all of my time with him, I knew his cues of, oh, that means I'm getting hungry. Oh, it's about that time of the day, so it's snack time. And that has been a good and a bad thing because it's given him a sense of peace when he's here, but it's also made it more challenging for him when he's not with us. Because if you don't know his schedule and don't know his cues, then he does pick up on that really quickly. I would say around the age of 2, we really noticed a mild version of stemming. I sing Moana to you now. Away, away. Stemming, toe walking started. He had walked flat-footed until then. Started hand flapping when he got excited or got nervous. It wasn't all the time, but it was anytime he had a sudden change in his emotions, it would correspond with some pretty significant stemming. And around 3, all of those things started to increase very significantly.
Yeah, big time.
Everything. This vocal stemming, he makes a lot of vocal stemming all day long. The hand flapping, he's exclusively a toe walker now and has been since about the age of 3. Right around the age of 3 too, his sleep patterns got very messed up. From the ages of 3 to about 7, he would sleep 2-3 hours at most at night, and then throughout the day he would be so exhausted that his body would just fall asleep because he wasn't getting adequate sleep at night. And of course that made for difficult challenges for us, our other kids, because I would have to be up with him all night, and then it made it more difficult for him to function in that school environment because he was so tired and he was falling asleep all the time. So I would say we started to notice a lot more dysregulation. He was losing any skills to regulate his emotions, regulate his body, regulate any kind of transitions, any kind of changes in environment or people that were around him. That internal regulation just seemed to disappear. And we couldn't really figure out why. We couldn't really pinpoint any one thing that happened that seemed to cause that to happen. He moved on to kindergarten at a new school. That was virtually impossible. Every other day I was being called to school to come and get him because he could not function in the classroom environment. He was just so upset all the time, crying all the time. But at home, he was relatively calm and relatively peaceful. I mean, his stemming was pretty exaggerated, but happy, calm. He was just a totally different kid when he was around us because there wasn't that level of anxiety or that level of, oh, I don't know what's about to happen. But at home, it was so regulated and we had such a consistent schedule that he was able to sort of navigate here a much different way than he could navigate in the outside world. Kind of what that meant for us is that made us very secluded. We hardly ever left the house. We hardly ever saw anybody else unless they came here to the house, because he just didn't feel comfortable going anywhere or being around other people. And it's difficult to explain to people when he's screeching and making these vocal stemmings that he's not upset, that this is just the only way that he has any way to verbalize a communication or any way to verbalize needs, wants, desires. So we really focused on changing our mindset of like, okay, speech might be in the cards for him. He might never vocally speak. So we need to learn what our options are here. What do we have available in the world? Because we don't know anyone else that has a non-speaking child. So we're kind of flying on our own here, blazing a new path with anyone we know. So we just dove in and researched a lot about different AAC devices and what that would mean on how to try to teach them how to use those. We did receive one through the school system that was an iPad, and it uses the TD Snap programming. It's a little robust for somebody who doesn't seem to have any grasp on not only language but even words, because up to the point of his first semester of kindergarten he was being treated as developmentally challenged and developmentally delayed, to the point where they were teaching him on a below pre-K level. Can you identify alphabetical letters A through Z? Can you identify numbers 1 through 10? Can you do simple colors? Can you do simple shapes? And he would attempt every now and then, but for the observer, it seemed like he could not do it. Not that he wouldn't do it.
And at what age was this now? Just to
He was in pre-K starting at age 3. So from 3 to 4, he was in pre-K, and then 5-year-old kindergarten. And even up until 5-year-old kindergarten, he was still being taught at a very low level because he would not engage. He would not participate in activities, even hand over hand activities, picture exchanges. They were trying to use the PEC system. They tried to use all different kinds of reward systems to try to get him to participate in verbal and nonverbal activities. And he just wouldn't. So,
well, at the same point, you couldn't get any eye contact from him unless he was extremely mad at you, and he would get right in your face and your eyes and look at you when he was so mad. You would never get a look from him ever.
It was like he was screaming at you with his eyes,
Yeah.
and it was pitiful to watch because you could tell that he had something that he wanted to say or something he needed to communicate, and he had no way to communicate it other than crying or screaming or throwing a fit. And again, to the outside observer, it just looked like he was unmanageable with his emotions. But because we were with him all the time and we saw the flow of his dysregulation, it was clear to us that like he has something to say. He's trying to tell us something. He just doesn't have a way to say it. And I think that was probably a turning point for us, is realizing that like these behaviors are actually his only way of communicating with us.
now, when you addressed that with his pediatrician, what did they tell you?
Got no help from any doctor that got you.
Yeah, we've
Never.
His primary pediatrician is a group practice, and they've been his pediatrician since he was an infant. They've never offered any sort of guidance or anything. So anything that we sought out was on our own. A lot of people said the same things over and over again. Oh, he needs ABA therapy. Oh, he needs to go to, a school that specializes in this. We just don't have anything locally around here, and we're not really in a position to move somewhere closer that has that. And so even with our best attempts, there wasn't anything locally that we could do. So we tried to learn as much as we could so we could implement that here at the house on a daily basis. Since I was already with him anyway, it just made sense for me to try to figure out as much as I could do that they were teaching at their schools and at their ABA centers that I could do around the clock.
And was there anything in regards to your own research? Did you do any testing, or did you do any dietary interventions, or what were the things that you changed in your home?
We didn't really understand or get the sense that it would be that beneficial to do dietary changes until last year, when we kind of felt like we had exhausted all of our resources and kind of took a turn to, like, I would say more of an alternative approach outside of things that would be considered traditional that you would get from your pediatrician. We really didn't want to go down the path of pharmaceuticals, because that was pretty much the recommendation of everyone was, oh, well, he's just out of control behaviorally. He might have ADHD. He has, behavior troubles. If we can't get him to sit, if we can't get him to participate, if we can't sit him still, then he can't learn. So we need to make him still. And my thought was sort of, well, if he doesn't have any words and he doesn't have the ability to communicate, his body is the only way that he has to get his point across and to get his feelings and emotions across. And I don't want to take that away from him. And if he doesn't have that, then we may never know another way for him to communicate, because it doesn't look like speech is going to be possible for him for whatever reason. So we sort of went down the road of, let's see what we can do. Dietary, taking things out, adding things in. Let's see if we can add things like probiotics. Let's see if we can add things like CBD oil. And that was one of the things that we felt like finally we saw a tiny, tiny glimpse of, oh, this might actually be something.
Yeah.
This might be something that could help him in a more natural way. It's not pharmaceutical. He's responding to it well. He's responding to it consistently instead of just like, oh, that worked on Tuesday, but it didn't work on Saturday. He's responding to it in a consistent way. And it's something we could give him consistently that was available. And that's sort of how we ended up meeting Jana.
Correct.
Let's back up for a second, if you don't mind, before we get to Jenna, because that's going to be a central piece of a big change, I think, that occurred. But I know at one point he entered ABA, correct? And I remember you telling me it didn't work out, and then COVID hit. Why don't you tell us, how this all developed with him starting to communicate?
Sure. So just for this purpose of this interview, he didn't ever officially do ABA. We went on 3 separate intake interviews and had him do the whole gamut of intake questionnaires and all the things that you answer, the sheet after sheet of what he can and cannot do at 3 different centers. And he was not put on as a viable patient at any of those centers. So we never actually got in to get him like ABA on a consistent basis.
We tried cash paying. They won't take cash. They only want insurance. And then we had to go for Katie Beckett. It's the craziest thing we've ever.
What was the reason that he was declined services?
Well, it started with you have to be on the wait list just to get the intake. So we were on wait list for years. Then he would get there and do the intake, and they're like, well, we don't really think we have anybody that can meet his needs if he's non-speaking, because if he can't communicate with us, then we can't help him. We won't be able to tell what he understands and doesn't understand. So then we won't know if he's able to do it or he just won't do it. And that was sort of consistent across the board with speech, OT, ABA, everybody we talked to. We were sort of getting that feedback of like, oh, well, if he doesn't have any way to communicate, then we don't know how to help him. And like, our problem was we need him to find a way to communicate. So we're coming to you, asking you, what can we do to help him find any way to communicate? Knowing full well that it might never be verbal speech. We were fine with that, but we also were uneducated and didn't know what our other options were. So yeah, COVID hit. Spring of 2020 here in Georgia, they closed schools with about 6 weeks left of the spring semester. So they came home and, it was real fend for yourself. We'll send you some worksheets and good luck kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then during the summer, it became really clear that we were going to have to make the choice of, are we going to send our kids back to school? Because at that time we would have had one in 3rd grade, he would have been in 1st grade, and we had a pre-K. So it didn't really make a lot of sense for us to send them all back because they were going to have to be masked. We knew he wouldn't be able to do that because of his sensory needs. He would not be able to wear a mask all day. And again, because he didn't have a way to communicate any needs, that verbal stimming and the screaming and all that kind of stuff was all he really had. And his sensory needs were very heightened at that time. Yeah, everything was bothering him, clothing, shoes, everything. So it didn't seem logical to send him back to school. So everybody stayed home. We moved to virtual school. I did virtual school with everyone. Our first semester, again, was challenging. They didn't really know what they were doing. We weren't really sure how we should be expecting this to go, but it became pretty clear that it wasn't effective, that what was going on wasn't effective. We weren't getting anything out of it. We were repeating the same 2 or 3 exercises, 2 or 3 bits of information, ABCs, numbers, colors, over and over again. And he just wasn't engaged. He wasn't interested at all. We requested a new teacher for the spring semester, and about 2 weeks into the spring semester, she suggested, why don't we try something a little bit more robust, a little bit more exciting, a little bit more interactive? So she suggested boom cards and frankly suggested some things that I wasn't sure he would be able to do because he had never shown any capability of doing that. it only took us about 2 weeks to realize that not only was he capable of doing it, but it became clear that he could read, because he was doing the instructions before the voiceover even had a chance to say the instruction. He would start to do what was being asked. It was written on the page, and then a voice would come over, but he was doing it before she even had a chance to give him instructions. So we turned off the voice, let him start to read the instructions. He was progressing at an unbelievable pace. It was very scary for us, and very overwhelming for everyone involved, the teachers, for us, because no one could understand how a child who just went from I don't know I appear to not know my ABCs, I appear to not know numbers, to then reading on an above grade level and answering questions, comprehension questions from paragraphs, doing double digit math, and it all happened within a 5-week period. It just didn't make sense to any of us. So
And at that point, he started typing up words
yeah,
on a keyboard as well.
yeah. So we had the regular computer keyboard and would ask him questions, and then he would hand over hand try to type out answers. And it was very slow, and it was a little meticulous on our part. But we pushed really hard to get an AAC device, and that's when we got it. Was the electronic AAC device was that same time period. And he really kind of blossomed a little bit. We could see his anxiety start to go down, because we could ask him a question, and even if it was just a 1-word yes or no answer.
We started with.
Yeah, we started with yes or no, and even that, you could just tell he was so relieved. He had this peace about him of like, I'm upset. They asked me a question and we got an answer. We got a result. They did something to make it better. They did something to make me feel better, something to make it right. And we could just tell that this was going to be a way for him to at least get his basic needs met. And to us at the time, from where we had been living, that seemed like a miracle in and of itself, because just to know that we could do anything to calm his anxiety and calm his body was just so out of control. He just didn't seem to have any control over his thoughts, emotions, feelings, body, anything. It was just a lot all the time. And he seemed very overwhelmed all the time. And we just couldn't find anything to do for him. And so it progressed pretty rapidly from there. He finished up that school year. We worked with him all summer on his AAC device. We used the boom cards all summer. But then when he went back to school in 2nd grade, it all started again with the anxiety. He wouldn't do the boom cards with the teachers. He wouldn't use the AAC device with the teachers. And it was a really, really challenging year. And
this is the time period where you took him to started Katie Beckett and you took him to the psychologist.
Yeah, we took him to get more evaluations done, and they said that he likely had ADHD, but again, because they couldn't ask him certain questions and he wouldn't respond to certain questions, they couldn't get an accurate assessment. Same with speech, same with everything, basically.
And at that point, that's how I prescribed all those medicines.
We took him to get more evaluations. And when we did all those evaluations with anyone we worked with, they would not let me participate as part of those evaluations. And because they removed the one person that made him feel comfortable, they removed me from the hand over hand experience. He refused to do anything. And their assessment of that was he cannot do it. Where it was really a question of, have we put him in an environment where he feels so anxious, so out of control? He has nobody to make him feel comfortable. He's working with a stranger he's never met before. He's being asked to do these things that he's never been asked to do before, and there's no comfort at all. So there was no presumed competence by anyone.
Okay.
It was just.
And what age are we talking about right now? Where are we at?
This was just in the last 2 years.
Okay, and so just to remind everyone, I'm not sure if I mentioned it or you did, but he's 9 years old.
Yeah, so he would have been about 7 when we went to get further evaluations, because he was getting to the age where I'm not speaking, I can't communicate, I won't communicate using my AAC device with other people. He started to ramp up on behaviors that started to get very scary for him, very upsetting for the adults that were working with him. He was frankly physically violent with his teachers and therapists at school, to the point where they were having me remove him from school within 2 or 3 hours of the school day starting.
And it turns out, as you have told me, all of that had a reason, correct? That's, as you found out later from him, in fact, right? He typed it up for you. What was that reason that it didn't work out in school?
Well, he told us several things. Some of the things were that they weren't kind to him. Some of the things were that he could hear them saying things like they didn't understand why he was even in school, because he can't do anything anyway, so why is he here? And he said, they don't like me and they don't want me to be there.
I wouldn't want to be there, but
Right.
imagine how a child feels, that's coming there for help, and you hear that. I can't imagine the pain that he felt. I would,
Well, not just that, but no one wants to be talked about, much less when you can hear everything that they're saying about you and they're just a few feet away, and they assume that you're so developmentally delayed that you can't understand the words that they're saying about you. I mean, it was just very confusing and very hurtful. And
not to interrupt you, but looking back to it, we honestly didn't know that he understood everything everyone was saying.
That's true.
We didn't know he understood what we were saying.
That's true. It has been brought to our attention very clearly by him that from a very early age, he could hear and understand everything that everyone was saying about him. And we have apologized to him just hundreds of times, because thinking back on all the conversations we had about him while he was in the next room or while he was walking around the house, it just breaks our heart, because we didn't think he was paying attention to us. It wasn't that we didn't think he could hear us, but we just didn't think he cared what we were saying. And it turns out he cared about everything that everyone was saying, and that it was really hurtful and very painful.
So what are some of the things that have transpired with his, as his communication skills advanced? What did you learn? Where's he coming from, and how deep is his knowledge? It turns out he had some insights,
right,
in regards to having certain connections and knowledge. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? What kind of things transpired that were like, whoa? Because I think it really started to get even more scary almost.
It was right after the time that Ashley took him to the psychologist, and he prescribed medicines. Mm-hmm. And you can say what those medicines are, I don't remember.
He had prescribed something to calm him down, basically. And I brought the prescription home, and I don't know why, because I had never done this before, ever. I showed it to him and I said, how do you feel about this? And it was one of the first complete sentences he ever wrote. And he said, no. And I said, well, what do you mean no? He said, no, that will make me a zombie.
Wasn't it risperidone? I think you mentioned.
I think so, yeah. And I was just shocked. And I said, so do you not want to take this? You don't think this will help you? And he said no, very emphatically, that he did not want to take that. And so I reached back out to the doctor, got another option. I said, we've done a little research and we don't feel comfortable with this option. And I mean, the research that we did do said that was one of the side effects, was extreme tiredness, extreme, lethargy. And so it seemed interesting that he would say that, and that it would correspond with what other people had said. But, it was more of like a little, that's interesting. And then we just sort of moved on. We got another prescription. We showed it to him. He said no. We got another one and showed it to him, and he said he would think about it. And then a little while later, he said he didn't really want to take any of those because it would make him not feel like himself. And so we opted not to take the pharmaceuticals at all. We didn't try it. It was too scary for us that he would be so set on not taking it that we just didn't feel like we could in good conscience move forward with those.
Yeah, force him to do it against his
Yeah.
will. No.
Yeah.
And it was right around this time that just one random night we asked him, "Is there anything we can give you that would help?" And he wrote cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we started our journey down cannabis.
And anyone that knows us knows that that was not really in our vocabulary at the time.
Ever.
It wasn't something that we were knowledgeable about. It wasn't something that we had a lot of information about, and didn't really know anyone that we could turn to that we felt comfortable getting information about. So we did research and looked at different kinds of companies, different kinds of things that they offered. And that is when we came across Jana and that CBD oil, and specifically because we were trying to find something that would ease his nervous system, thinking that if we could ease his nervous system, then maybe it would be easier for him to control those behaviors and control that lack of bodily control, and that he might be able to make it through an entire school day.
And at that point, we reached out to a doctor with only one thing in mind, was to get Jakey a state low THC CBD oil card.
Mm-hmm.
We got that, and when Ashley took him to the office, he offered her some CBD oil, and it was from Unity Formulas. And that's kind of where the story starts, is that we reached out to Jarek, and which is the owner of the company, and we were running out of the oil and we couldn't get it from the doctor. And I kind of built a relationship with him. He made us some CBD oil, sent it to us. And that's when I'd reached out to him about Jana. He was the nurse that was on the website. And it was just kind of a long shot when I did it. And
because at that time we were just grasping at straws.
Yeah.
If anybody anywhere in the world could give us any information, we felt like we had exhausted our possibilities here in Georgia. No one we talked to seemed to be taking us seriously. No one we talked to seemed to be of the belief that we were not the ones making up this information, that, you know, it wasn't coming directly from Jacob, that we were the ones doing it on his behalf. And we couldn't find anyone that would just take our word for it, that he's asking for this and we don't know where to go. We're trying to do something we've never done before and get answers from someone who is hopefully trustworthy and reliable, that can lead us in a good, positive direction.
Well, we kind of skipped one step that I've talked to you about, Dr. Bogner, when you asked if there was anything that we could suggest for parents to do. At that same time period that Jacob started using CBD, Ashley and I started using it as well. And it really helped us,
like,
calm.
I don't know, be more open-minded to possibilities of, like, this could be a way for us to meet him on a level that we're not going to be able to meet him at any other way, because he can't talk to us. And maybe if we're experiencing the same thing that he's experiencing, we can somehow understand where he's coming from in a different way.
And at that point, one night, we're sitting there, we've had our CBD oil, Jacob's had his CBD oil, and he starts writing. And that's when he wrote what we sent to Jana, and Jana got to you. He just, out of the blues.
And I want to read this for our audience here. And so that's when Jana first communicated with me, and she attached a screenshot of your communication. And so this is what he wrote. The question, I think, was, is there a cure for autism, correct? Mm-hmm. The answer was, the genes mask my leukocytes. And then it says, what does that cause? And his answer was, the answer was, the genes mask my leukocytes. Is there a cure for autism? Yes. Do you know what it is? Yes. Can you tell us, please? And the answer was SOS. What does that do? It breaks down the ococpin in my brain. Ococpin, I think none of us could understand at that point, but that was basically the communication that led me to reach back out to Jana and say, hey, get me in touch with the Boatman.
Well, and prior to that, that had been almost a year before we send that message to Jana, he had written that almost a year ago. And for almost a year, we felt like we scoured the internet. SOS, could it stand for this? Could it be short for this? Could it be an acronym for this? We could not find anything that made any kind of sense. I reached out to any friend or friend of a friend that I had, and we did have a conversation between one person that was interested in what Jacob had to say. It sparked a little interest in him, and he asked him several different questions about the leukocytes and things like that. His primary research was in things regarding mental degeneration, like Alzheimer's and things like that. And he was interested in how that might correspond, because people that he had worked with had suggested in the past to him that autism might be an autoimmune degenerative disease of the brain. And so he had some questions, and that was sort of where the leukocyte information came from. He told that gentleman, and it just blew his mind. And again, he went and did more research and asked other people and couldn't come back with anything regarding SOS that meant anything to any of them. And so we just chalked it up to well, that was an interesting little bit of knowledge. And then about a year later, it led us to you.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah, so I took that conversation, and I took those trigger words, leukocytes, SOS, and brain. And while I was waiting for the confirmation of you guys, if you even wanted to talk to me, and I did my research, and I was heavily involved in my practice, at least, in discussing mold toxicity with my patients, because every child that I tested had mold toxins in the urine, so that was a big interest. And so I came across one paper. I don't know why I haven't seen that prior, but one of the papers discussed mold toxins were fed to pigs, and these pigs got really sick with that particular mold toxin, the most common one, the Don toxin. And these pigs started to lose weight, they became socially withdrawn, and they had immune issues with the immune system, especially with leukocytes. So I'm like, wow, leukocytes, that's what Jacob mentioned. Interestingly, what they then did, they wanted to decontaminate those pigs from those mold toxins to see if they improve. And so what they gave the pigs was sodium sulfite, and the abbreviation of sodium sulfite is SOS. And I'm like, wow, that would be something if Jake could confirm this. And so then I met you, and we discussed everything, and I learned about your family, and you showed me on the videos how he can type and all of that, and then I introduced myself, I think, to Jacob after your made a little PowerPoint, like, hey, I'm Dr. Wagner, I have a son as well, maybe I can help you, you can help my son, we all win, kind of thing, right? And had a lot of chemical charts on the different slides, and on one slide I had the SOS on there. I'm like, well, SOS, sodium sulfite, here, it comes from a crystal called therinite, and we put the chemical formula on there. I'm like, Jake, is this what you meant in your communication? And so that's how I got in communication with you guys. But tell me what happened then after you saw my little PowerPoint.
Yeah, so you sent that PowerPoint, and we set him down in front of the computer. We went over it page by page, and he seemed kind of uninterested, but he was sort of giving it a glance. And we got to that one page that had the cycle of it. It goes here, and it goes here, and it goes here. And he stopped.
The genetic SNP.
Yes, and he was very interested in that one. And then we went a little further, and you had the actual molecular build on the page, and he stopped and told us that it was missing something. And we sent it back to you, and you responded with, well, that's an interesting insight on that, and let me look and see what I can find regarding that. And I think that's when we knew we were sort of in a whole nother league with his ability to understand that kind of stuff. And we are not from a medical family. We do not have a medical background. Those are not words or phrases or things we have pulled up on our computers at any time. This is an ability that he has that we cannot give a concrete reason for, other than he's just gifted with something that we don't understand.
Well, and we got to go back and give credit, because we did ask him when he wrote that original first message, who did tell you that? And his answer was God.
Yeah.
And there was more to it. I think that some of the technical aspects of his abilities, I think you transpired as well in regards to his IQ and his ability to read words, or even answer questions that were asked in different languages. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so he has an iPad that he is allowed to use. It's his one source of comfort and entertainment. And I noticed that he kept watching something that was in Spanish, and I kept changing it, thinking it was an accident, that he had accidentally changed the settings somehow, and he kept changing it back. And so finally I just asked him, do you understand what they're saying? And he very clearly he said yes, 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 yes on his sheet, and kind of gave me the look like, why would I watch it? I didn't understand what they were saying. And so that led us down an entire conversation path with him that went on for several months of, well, if you understand Spanish, what other languages do you understand? And do you like other languages? And he has informed us that he understands pretty much every language. And he, in his free time, watches different kinds of things in Russian and French and Mandarin. We went on Google Translate and typed in a bunch of questions in all those different languages in those. He's laughing.
He's listening to everything we're saying.
We typed in questions in Russian, Mandarin, and all those things, and then he would answer them in English. And we were just blown away. Again, we're a single English-speaking couple. We can speak a little Spanish, but certainly not something that we do regularly.
I think you mentioned in one communication that he mentioned his IQ was 560, correct? And I know that there was something to it, you know. I mean, for me, you always have to remain skeptical, you know, because yeah, right. Like that's everything that I have learned until this point would be overthrown out, you know, and out the window. But once we started to discuss this chemistry, you know, it's a very difficult, you know, after looking at this for years, you know, it was very hard to understand. But when I posted that structure and he's like, no, it's missing the sodium component in its chemical structure, I was like, whoa, he's right. And that's how we eventually got to, you know, the sodium thiosulfate. And he's like, yes, 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 this is it. And everything that he said to this point made sense. It's not just that, you know, he said something and we followed him blindly. No, it was like a missing puzzle piece that I had been looking for. And it totally made sense, you know. And then we learned all about this molecule. I mean, I'm still learning about it. It's, you know,
and it's like you present something to him and he confirms or makes a little note or gives a little tidbit, but it's not like he's coming at us all the time with just tons of information. He doesn't come to us. We bring this information to him, and then he sort of confirms or denies or, you know, gives us one little piece of information, and it's kind of like a little stepping stone every time. It's not like he's giving us the end result. He's just like getting us to that next step every time.
It's like you know, ChatGPT. You get the right answer from ChatGPT if you ask the right question. You have to really specifically ask the question. If you go too general, it says, you know, whatever. And so that was the thing. Nevertheless, he still mentioned it the first time, you know, with the SOS, brought us on that path. And so we found out all about sodium thiosulfate. I've never heard about it until that day, you know, and until he kind of confirmed it. And, you know, it turns out, you know, we have other webinars that we can talk about that, you know, but it's a salt that was discovered in 795. 1795 by a French chemist that also discovered oxygen, and it was even back then considered miracle salt. It's sulfur and salt, sodium thiosulfate, and it was a cleansing agent, and it was first approved by the FDA in 1939 for in the IV form for cyanide poisoning. And so there we had it, and then we're like, okay, now what? So what happened then?
I don't know. It's all been such a blur.
Yeah.
There's been so many changes in him as a person. I feel like he's a totally different human being. He's blossomed so much.
His body is calm. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Eye contact.
And I think he just seems seen. He just is giving off the presence of like, oh, I'm a person and what I'm saying matters and people are taking me seriously. The things that I have to share are of value and are making a difference. They're helping me. So if I keep putting this out there, maybe I can get that help. Like he seems so much more aware of himself, aware of the world, aware of, his abilities, I guess.
And that is after you decided to actually give him sodium thiosulfate, is what you're saying?
Yeah, so we were doing CBD oil and we were seeing a pretty significant difference. His behaviors really leveled out. His anxiety sort of leveled out. We felt like we were coming to a much different place of regulation, a much different place of like, oh, he might actually be able to start interacting in the world again, because his behaviors were just so out of control. It was unmanageable. And he was the one that said there's still more. There's more things that we can do, but he couldn't really like narrow it down for us. He just kept saying there was more. And then when we got in touch with you, we talked about a bunch of different possibilities, and one of the things that you explained to us could make a big difference was trying to regulate his microbiome, and that was in line with a lot of things that we had sort of started down that path, but again just weren't educated enough to really understand what we were dealing with and sort of all the components of we have to cleanse things and then replace things and get the bad stuff out and replace it with new stuff. And you hooked us up with Dr. Alex, and we went through a whole regimen of trying to make sure that we were supplementing with things he was lacking and trying to get rid of things that were causing problems. We did all kinds of blood work with you guys. And I think some questions got answered through that. But I think there were still a lot of question marks of it's not really pinpointing any specific deficiency or any specific genetic malformation or anything like that. And so I think we were still sort of stirring the pot of what other things can we put into this mix. And when we landed on the STS, we were skeptical because the only thing we could find for the layman's world that it was used for was pool cleaner. And
yeah, it is used as a dechlorinator, to kind of detoxify water.
And again, for a non-medical person, as his mom, that was concerning for me because we had worked so hard to stay away from the pharmaceutical side of things that it seemed a little suspect that we would use something that would be considered a cleaning agent. So,
sure, but again, the first thing that came with sodium thiosulfate was it's been used in medicine for almost 100 years.
Right.
And so that certainly came first.
But again, not easy to find for the layperson.
Oh yeah, I've never heard of it. So
right, in medical documents and medical journals, and it was a little bit wild to us because once you sort of opened our eyes to it, we had spent that whole year searching for answers. And once you sort of brought it to our attention, it seemed like so many things opened up to us because, again, we knew the right question to ask. And once we knew the right question to ask, we could find it everywhere. Everywhere we looked, we could find it in, oh, it was used in, let's use it regarding food source. Let's use it regarding crops. Let's use it regarding, the livestock that we're then turning into the meat that we're eating and things like that. And it was just wild to see after that amount of time, so many connections that weren't questionable. They were such clear, crystal clear connections of this makes complete sense of how from the beginning of the food source to the time that we eat it, how this could all play into why it's a problem.
So to make this story even more fascinating, 2 weeks after we kind of have come to the conclusion, oh my God, it's sodium thiosulfate, how interesting. There was another patient of mine that was in a different country. They've been my patient for about 3 years, and he is a 15-year-old boy. Maybe we can have him on as well with his mom. And they were of Italian background. They were a Michigan family, but they moved temporarily to Italy. They had a lot of family there, a lot of support. He's a 15-year-old nonverbal boy. And one of his I guess abilities was also to communicate with typing, and I knew that from prior. In fact, at times he was aggressive and he was very violent, and when mom asked him, why do you hit me, he would always say, sorry mom, I feel so bad, I didn't mean to, but my body made me do it. But I never ever dared to ask, hey, do you know what the cure for autism is? And so having heard everything from Jake and having learned from Jake about the sodium thiosulfate, one day the mom reached out to me and saying, hey, we're having such a difficult time here in Italy. What do we do next? And so I asked her, when he comes home from school, can you ask him just randomly, does he know what the cure for autism is? And sure enough, he wrote, yes, it's called SOS. And at that point, I literally dropped everything, and I'm like, wow, something is happening here. This is.
I remember that phone call.
That is not a coincidence.
I think we spiraled for about a week after that.
Yeah, we did.
You get the goosebumps, you can't sleep, you're like, oh my God, is this real? And I had to pinch myself. And that family was very religious as well. And of course he said, I'm in touch with God as well. And I know at one point when we discussed that, you ask questions to that boy and vice versa. And, then it kind of went to the point where I think you mentioned that at one point, Jake had a very emotional day, and you asked him what was going on. And he said, oh, yeah, God visited me today. And then you reached out to me asking, hey, can you ask the boy in Italy, when was the last time that God visited with you? And I know in Jake's case, it was a Thursday, right? And sure enough, without knowing, that boy also said Thursday. And there's a lot more that transpired in regards to that.
And it always seems like there's a correlation between his anxiousness, and then he'll fall asleep really hard, and then he'll say that he had a visit from God, and then he will have some additional information or some additional answer, or an answer to a question we asked weeks ago. It will come to him, or he will have the answer. And
you can tell when he's working a problem out. Yeah. I've texted you many times. I think Jacob's working today.
Yeah.
And that's when he falls asleep at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and he's out hard. Yeah. And he wakes up excited, and he has information.
And I mean, the conversations I had, for example, with you guys in regards to the deeper meaning of all of this, and the same conversations I had with the Italian family, they go very much spiritual to the level of good versus evil, right? And maybe that's not part of this discussion right now. Maybe that's for future discussion, but it's absolutely mind-blowing of what's happening on a spiritual level and all of this. However, maybe
I think I think they're both experiencing some of the same experiences, very parallel to each other, so
Yeah.
far apart. And it would be interesting.
And there were, and you
And
mentioned there were more. There were more. You mentioned names and even locations of other individuals who have these abilities. And you know, the Italian boy also went deeper into the chemistry and mentioned other chemicals that are very closely related to the sodium thiosulfate. For example, sodium, not sodium, but thiocyanate, you know, which is a breakdown product of cyanide when it combines with sodium thiosulfate. So it was all just very true. It's not just random words that, you know, your boys spit out. It was just opening a channel that nobody has ever looked at. Nobody has ever looked at cyanide, chronic cyanide toxicity, which again is another topic, and it's a door that just recently opened, but that we're exploring. But tell me, maybe to wrap up, and I'm sure we're going to have more discussions about this as we progress. Having your boy now on sodium thiosulfate,
and
being
we
on
are,
this journey,
yeah, we're doing the drops in a drink, and also the topical cream. And he has explained that he feels it in his body differently, but he can feel both of them. And
They have different feelings to him.
yeah, he experiences them differently.
overall, what changes so far have you noticed? I'm getting these school reports that are all perfect, you know, no accidents, excellent day at school, ate his lunch, all of that. What have you noticed, and what has your family noticed or your friends in regards to him? Because a week
But-
after he started, you sent me a video of him completing your sentences. He was having speech and he was singing, I think, remember on the pool, that video
Yeah.
that you sent me? Tell me, what have you seen overall so far? I mean, we're certainly not at the end of the journey yet, but
Well, one thing I don't think we've mentioned is that we've only had the pleasure of working with you since April, and it's only August. So for us, it's been quite a whirlwind. And for him, he has said many times that he feels so much better, that he feels like himself, that he feels so peaceful. And those are just things that a year ago we would not have believed would be possible.
I see it. You are his mom. From the day that I met him, he was just on his trampoline, right? That's it. He was so, like you mentioned, out of control with being overwhelmed with this environment. And I mean, he was sitting here with us for, I don't know, good 20 minutes, smiling away, just being excited to be part of an interview. I think you mentioned he was excited all day, right?
Yeah. And
I would see
I
a
would
big
say,
change. So
yeah, absolutely. And I would say this is the first time that I feel like we've seen a more like holistic change, where it's not just a behavior or a stemming or a thing. It's more holistic. It's more, his sleep is more regular, his eating is more regular, his ability to make transitions, which again, for a neurotypical family does not seem like a big deal, because a neurotypical person does not notice when you're making transitions. You just move from activity to activity. But for him, that was always a very explosive experience. And now with just a little bit of prompting, he can be guided to the next thing and just move on with his life and just move to the next thing. And I can't imagine for him on the inside that is not a relief, to be able to not get himself so worked up to the point that he's crying and throwing a fit, that he can just say, okay, we're moving on to the next thing. And it doesn't always go smoothly. and it doesn't come without prompting and without guidance. But the fact that he can do it now and he couldn't do it 6-7 months ago is astounding. The fact that he can sleep more than 3 hours at a time, I know, even the basic medical knowledge, I know that at least he's giving his body a chance to recover and recuperate from the day, which he wasn't getting before. And so he's giving himself an opportunity to grow and develop in ways that he didn't have before because of this support that he's getting now. And it's not something that we thought we were going to be able to experience for him. And he just seems overall, so he seems like a child who is understanding that he is a whole person and that he is appreciated and that he matters as a whole person, and that he's not just floating around in the ether of the world and just surviving. He actually seems to be thriving right now, which I would say this is probably the first time in his 9 years of life that I can honestly say that he is thriving.
So it's incredible. It's beautiful. And I'm still blown away every day. I wake up and I'm like, thank God this happened. Something happened, because for so many years we didn't see anything, kind of no hope, no matter what we did. What do you think, speaking more spiritually, what is happening? Why is this happening? Why are there others? Is this kind of a time of spiritual awakening where it's the autism individuals themselves that dig themselves out of that hole that they're in? Or why is this happening?
According to Jacob, and I feel like some of the things that Alex has said or Alex has mentioned, he would agree with him. Jacob has said emphatically, this is spiritual warfare. And I feel like it's not only with the individuals that are experiencing autism.
Well, wait, you're cooked up. Jacob just pulled me aside to say, this is my story. Please tell them this is about God, not me.
But I was going to say the toll it takes on everyone around that person, the caregivers, whoever those may be, the parents, the siblings. It's not just about that individual. And I will say for us, it has been extremely challenging for our spiritual life, because you look at your child and you see them as this beautiful human being, and then you think about how you think about God, and you just can't reconcile how it would be possible for a loving God to allow that kind of thing. And I feel like he's in a time right now where he's showing us it's not about what God is allowing or doing to me or not doing to me. It's about what we are willing to open ourselves up to, the understanding of the possibilities of what could be, and how we should be loving each other and how we should be supporting each other, even when we can't communicate, even when we don't have good
unconditionally
behavior.
right?
Yeah. And I think we've really, you got to dig deep. You got to dig deep some days and really pull at the deepest parts of you and be like, if I believe what I really say I believe, then I better start walking the walk, because this is as hard as I ever thought it would be. And I never imagined it being this hard.
And on the flip side, he hasn't only had visits from God, we've also had the devil in our house.
Yeah.
And
as
of a month ago.
It's been terrifying.
And it's not just him, the other individual in Italy had the same experiences, and that's why it changed my life as well, because it's irrefutable. It's when
your
two
child
individuals
when your
telling
child
me
is
the same
screaming,
story.
Yeah, from the end of the hallway screaming, and you go in there and he has tears running down his face and he's just staring off into the distance, and he's telling you on his words that the devil is here. It's terrifying, and I don't know, it pulls at your spirituality in a way that I personally have never experienced, and I don't think you have either.
I mean, at this point, we kind of have a feeling, or we know how he is when the devil's here. And looking back at the videos, it makes you wonder if when he was 2, 3, 4,
How many times?
how many times it was when the devil was here, because it's the same emotions, the same look, the same anger.
And he has told us recently that the devil comes to him more because he's getting better. The devil comes to him.
That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
The other boy in Italy,
Mm.
the mom was telling me that the reason he told me that he's hitting me is because the mom is helping him, and that's going against the devil's wishes. And it's just incredible, in a sense that how many questions arise just from that. This is much deeper than we could ever imagine. We know from Spelling to Communicate that they're all in there, and so there's no doubt that everything that's happening here with Jake or with this other child, that this is true. It's the truth. And so
and again, I think that other mom would agree that when you're looking at your child that you know and love, and something is happening that doesn't make logical sense. Nothing happened to them. They're not injured. They're not hungry. They're not hurting. And they're clearly terrified.
Yeah.
And they're clearly feeling like they're in danger. It's hard to explain to other people, but you can't live it and not believe it.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, as you mentioned, this is just the beginning of our journey. I think it's an incredible journey. Certainly the sodium thiosulfate so far has helped a lot of patients, a lot of kids to find their voice,
And that's all Jacob said he ever wanted.
Speak.
All he ever says is he just wants to help people.
And it's something I've never experienced in my 16 years of looking at autism, or for the last 6 years more intensively working with families. God bless him for transmitting this information, and let's see where it takes us. But I think the story needed to be told, that we have the autism community, the autism individuals involve themselves, and that hopefully at the end of the day they'll be the ones who really had the solutions for their own entrapment or whatever it is, spiritual warfare, that they got themselves out of it. And all it took was somebody to just really listen, I guess. You guys, as wonderful parents you never doubted him. You asked him about the medications, you believed him, and I think that is the reward. That is the universe rewarding you of the answers are coming. And so we will continue to work hard. I'm very blessed to have met your family, and it has changed my life, certainly. And my goal, I changed my careers because I wanted to have an impact on other families, because I understand the hardships that come with it. And if we can just have an inch of improvement, it's beneficial for the entire family. But I don't think we will give up. The goal is to consistently hear Jacob's voice and everybody's voice, because ultimately that's what they deserve, right? And
well, and I think you hit it right on the head. I think that we are of the belief that that's the goal, is for us to give up, to just stop trying, to just let it be something that ruins lives and doesn't open up the doors of possibilities and the doors of abilities for all of these individuals. Because I think about all the people before this time that didn't even have the ability to have the AC devices or the spelling or anything like that, how different their lives might have been, and how they might have been able to change the course of this trajectory of so many people having autism now versus just 50, 60 years ago. If there would have been a way to communicate with them in an effective way, might they have been able to change the course of this thing?
and it's already changing the course, and we won't stop until we finally reach that point. And so we're all eternally grateful for your family, for Jake, and let's see what happens in the next 6 months. We certainly will have a follow-up with you guys. We're almost in touch every day, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
God, every morning is like, good morning, I hope you have a great day. He doesn't expect anything in return, just, hey, just hope you have a great day. And it is so helpful for me, for these little reminders that you sent me to keep going. And so I want to thank you. It's incredible that you shared that story, that you came out with the story, and let's build on it. Let's keep educating ourselves. Let's keep learning. Let's keep listening, and we'll have an update. I think whenever we think there's an update, and we'll go from there. So anything you wanted to say? It's kind of like last thoughts.
I think from our side, we'd like to thank you very much, because you were the first doctor to listen.
Ever.
Yeah.
The first one to ever take us seriously, to ever believe that another course of action might be possible, to believe that he might have something valuable and important to provide for his own care, provide for his own health, for his own benefit. And it's just, we feel seen, but for us as his parents, it's such a relief to know that somebody sees him as valuable enough to want to help him.
And I think at the end of the day, Jake wants to be better, but I think he wants everyone
to be better.
to be better.
That's beautiful. Jake, we love you for that, and we will make it happen, my friend.
Hey, do you want to tell him bye-bye?
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that was the perfect cherry on top. So thank you both. We'll be in touch, and hopefully this message will reach someone and inspire someone to keep going. Never give up. There's always hope. There's always another way. And with that being said, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you, Dr. Wagner.
Thank you so much.
thank you.